Wakey, wakey, hands off Snakey. It's time for the hair of the dog that bit ya. That is right, it is your Saturday morning hangover cure. It is time for Sports Frenzy 2.0, the weekend edition, dropping here on July the 13th, 2024. Now, this is a very, very unusual situation in many regards and respects for me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane, your humble host this week. Number one, your Uncle Dave, the Conquistador, Dave Height, not with me. Had a family obligation this week. Number two, as this drops on July the 13th, we have just seen Party Gras 2.0 with Bret Michaels, Lou Gramm, Don Felder, and Dee Snider. So we will have that review for you next week in our music segment. And then, third, new recording platform. We are no longer recording through Spotify, although you can still find our podcast on Spotify. We are recording now through Riverside, which is their recommended platform. So we'll see how this goes. I've already posted one episode earlier this week, our sports edition. If you do not listen to the sports edition, shame on you. No eggs and bacon and grits, hash browns for you this morning. No aspirin until you go back and listen to this week's sports edition, dropping every Thursday morning. But that being said, we're going to do the best we can. You guys can now, my understanding is, drop comments. Your own free will, your own volition, whenever you want. Here's a comment, there's a comment, everywhere's a comment. You can drop a comment on each and every episode you want, and we will do our absolute best to respond to each and every one, positive or negative. But it is the weekend edition. You need to settle in. Get over the headache, the nausea, the rejection angst from last night. That's what I'm here for. Your Uncle Kev will get you through it. And as always, here on the weekend edition, what do? We start off with music. Now we're kind of in a lull. We're kind of in a down period when it comes to new rock and roll. Like I said, next week we have got a concert review coming for you. And then things will really kick off. We have got, I believe, 10 or 11 concerts lined up from the end of July through mid-October. So most weeks we'll have a concert review for you, starting next week. But for this week, with your Uncle Dave gone, I will discuss my childhood. No, I'm not laying down on a couch. We're not doing a therapy session. And by the way, I'm sorry, one of the things I've noticed with this new recording platform, we'll try to tweak it and change it and maybe do different things with the microphone, but my voice is coming out a lot louder than it normally would, even with all the yelling that I normally do. So I'll do my best to tone things down when I can and if I can. But when I say we're going to talk about my childhood, we're going to talk about the 70s. Now, I grew up in the 70s into the 80s. I graduated high school in 1984. So you can do the math there. So when disco was big, disco was popular, I was 10, 11, 12 years old, 75, 76, 77. So it was, I will admit, a big part of the formative years for me when it came to my musical tastes. And I have nothing but love for disco. I really love disco. I love old school country, Kenny Rogers, Ronnie Millsap, Dolly Parton, Charlie Pride. I love the music in that era, all through the 70s, all that music, because I feel like in that era, with music, with everything, despite what other people will lead you to believe, and of course, a lot of that going around now where there's a lot of people trying to divide us, trying to make us all hate each other. I believe that we were getting along much better than the media wanted you to believe. Hence and ergo, we get into the three-part PBS docuseries, and I know I've been doing a lot of this lately between the Beach Boys and Nickelback and Bon Jovi. The three-part docuseries from PBS that just wrapped up a week or two ago, and that would be Disco, Soundtrack of a Revolution. I found this, and this runs about 3 hours total, about an hour per episode. I found this abhorrent. This is false advertising. This is an abject and absolute lie on the part of PBS, as they tease that they are going to do a deep dive into the music of the disco era. And if I had to guesstimate, I would say over 3 hours, we get 20 to 25% about the music and the artists, and we get 75 to 80% about political bullshit. Abject political bullshit. This is not looking at the disco era in terms of music. This is looking at the disco era in terms of how can we still make people feel bad about racism and homophobia? How can we just make them feel more guilty and more awful? Because God forbid we're allowed to enjoy and love anything in this world. And that's why I'm so mad about this, because this was a big tease. This was a big, nasty, stupid, misleading tease on the part of PBS. And I'll explain why. I'll get into some detail here. Now, I'm in my late 50s. You, again, can do the math based on what I just told you about when I graduated from high school and when I was growing up listening to music. So the artists involved in the disco era, you should know them if you're of my age or even later. This travesty that PBS puts out barely touches on the major disco artists of the 70s. It's ridiculous. Now, I will give them credit. This is the only time in this entire review I will give them credit. I give them credit for talking to Anita Ward, Ring My Bell, and Thelma Houston, and Gloria Gaynor as well. Sorry. So 3 great ladies of disco. They touch on a little bit of Donna Summer. I wasn't overly upset with the coverage they gave her. Now, that's another one I reviewed. Now, that goes back a ways. But I did review that documentary as well about Donna Summer, the Queen of Disco. But compared to the attention they give to a lot of other issues and topics, it's a travesty. Same thing with the Bee Gees, because the insidious agenda here is that we're not going to talk about heterosexual white men. They're not allowed to have enjoyed disco, listened to disco, performed disco, made money off of disco. So the Bee Gees barely get a mention, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, maybe 5 spent on Saturday Night Fever. No interviews at all. Even archival footage. You could have pulled out archival stuff with Donna Summer. I think they had one brief archival interview with Donna Summer. Nothing with the Bee Gees. No mention whatsoever of Casey and the Sunshine Band, which to me is pathetic bullshit. They played one of the Casey and the Sunshine Band songs in the background for about a minute during one of their scenes. Chic, Nile Rodgers, a genius to this day, well respected in the music community among all genres: rock and roll, R&B, rap, blues, dance. No interview with Nile Rodgers. Chic gets a brief 10 or 15 second video clip with no mention of the band itself. This is all about, disco was all about gay people and African American women. That's the thesis. That is the main storyline here. And if you were straight and if you were a man, we don't want you. We're not going to talk about you. We're not going to acknowledge you. You don't have any place in our disco retrospective. And I find it very ironic and very stupid, once again, a reflection of this day and age, that we've got to put up with this. So we're going back to the 70s, but the hatred, the vitriol, the political bias is still 2024. It's still there, and it's still breathing and oozing and seething in every second of this docuseries. I barely got through this. I hated this so much, where I was going in expecting to relive some great moments from my childhood. Like I said, no mention of my favorite band. And just because it's my favorite band, you can't tell me Casey and the Sunshine Band was not one of the biggest disco acts of the 70s. You're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself. And Chic was another one. They do barely enough when it comes to the earlier songs and the way that they were stretched out, you know, to get an album-sized single that you could play for a discotheque for 15, 20 minutes. And then, of course, we're subjected to in the last 25 minutes about house music, because disco led to house music in Chicago. And oh my God, wasn't that great? And once again, if you're a white guy or you're a heterosexual, we don't want you. You're part of the problem, not part of the solution. This is an infuriating, disgusting piece of propaganda, is what Disco Soundtrack of a Revolution is. And for the little tiny nuggets that are dropped in there occasionally about some of the great disco artists that we might have forgotten, or some of the songs that we might not have heard in 20 or 30 years, it's all wiped out. It is all overwhelmed by bias and perceived oppression. And it's disgusting, and I'm ashamed that PBS would do this with taxpayers' money. But again, why should I be shocked? Because that's all NPR and PBS does now. Back in the day, they actually tried their best to put out cultural shows, music shows, Austin City Limits, that type of thing, where they weren't worried about propping up the Democratic Party and an agenda. That's all they're worried about now. That is all they're worried about. And then they wonder why Republicans want to cut their funding. Do I think it's right? No. But I'll tell you this, if they want taxpayers' money, they better start acting like they have some common sense and they play things down the middle of the road. Because last time I checked, Republicans pay taxes too. I cannot express to you how upset I was with this. 3 hours of my life I will never, ever, ever get back. And part of that's on me. I do not like, when it comes to a TV series or a movie, to stop halfway through and go, I'm wasting my time with this. I like to see it through to the bitter end, because on rare occasions, the ending will redeem the rest of the project, the rest of the movie, the rest of the show, the rest of the book. But in this case, it was just a miserable experience trying to make me feel bad about myself when all I wanted to do was watch a show about the disco artists of the 70s and early 80s. Shame on PBS. You can go to hell. And I'll tell you one little more personal aside. When I was a kid, we would always watch, now this is not PBS, okay, this is the Jerry Lewis telethon, but it's the same kind of thing. I badgered my father into donating when he told me when I was a kid and he knew better, like I do now. He said, you do not want to donate to these causes like this because the money will never go to what you think it's going to go to. And I'm telling you, the same thing applies to PBS. I would be shocked if anybody outside of a diehard liberal would donate to NPR or PBS anymore in this day and age because of garbage like this. Let's make disco music anti-Reagan, anti-white, anti-heterosexual, and we're going to pull people together like that. Again, we're talking about a party that claims that they're the party of inclusion. Yet it's amazing to me how they exclude the people they want. They're the problem. They are the problem. I will give Disco Soundtrack of a Revolution half a frenzy. It is disgusting. It is terrible. I would not waste my time on it. Especially if you're my age or older, don't do it. It's not about the music. It's about the agenda. All right, from that we move on. One new song to review this week. Deep Purple, the third single from their upcoming album Equals One, is Lazy Sod. Now, I will tell you this. 3 songs in, I'm liking this a lot, and I've never been the biggest Deep Purple fan in the world. Now, of course, I will admit, like most people should, that Smoke on the Water, especially the guitar riff, is a classic that cannot be topped. But other than that, it's been hit and miss. Their comeback in the 80s, Perfect Strangers, was very good. But since then, they've kind of, even though they're still on life support, and I'm not making a joke about their age, because they are old, they've been on life support and really haven't got a lot of airplay or any attention since Perfect Strangers. Maybe Equals One will change that. Because I loved Portable Door, I liked Pictures of You, and I really like Lazy Sod. Lazy Sod is a very, very cool song. It is about being complacent and being apathetic while the world around you is burning and it's in chaos and it's in quick demise. Again, appropriate lyrics for this day and age. And Ian Gillan sounds awesome. I think he's understood better than other lead singers who are getting older how to maintain his voice and how to use it effectively without doing the throat strength, the shredding of the vocal cords and bleeding, because you're trying to sing too hard, too long, too many nights in a row like a Steven Tyler or a John Bon Jovi. So kudos to him. Kudos to the entire band for a third great effort here. So this really makes me look forward to Equals One, and we'll have that review for you hopefully in a couple weeks here on Sports Frenzy, the weekend edition. Of course, I've got to run it by your Uncle Dave because you never know what kind of mood he's going to be in. Just kidding. He'll probably be okay with reviewing it as well, especially because we don't have many other albums coming out in the next few months until October, I believe, when we really get some, we get The Offspring, we get Miles Kennedy. So it's going to be a couple months. So we've got Mr. Big this month and Deep Purple, and that could be it for a while outside, of course, of concert reviews. All right, everybody. Let's move on from rock and roll to television and streaming. We have got a lot to discuss in terms of news, and then I've got a look back at WWE's Money in the Bank, the latest episode of The Boys, and let's start off with a show I've just recently discovered on Netflix. Now, this show is called Loudermilk. It stars Ron Livingston as a very angry, very sarcastic sobriety counselor. I believe it originally debuted quite a few years ago on the Audience channel, which is something that is exclusive to DirecTV. And Netflix got the rights to this, and from what I've been able to understand, this has become a fairly popular show with a second life. And we see this all the time. We've seen this now recently with Suits, where a show that was fairly popular, mildly popular, gets a second life on a streaming service and becomes a much bigger hit. Now, I'm not comparing Loudermilk to what Suits has become, some kind of a phenomenon. But I've gotten through the first season of Loudermilk. There are 3 seasons total. And I'm enjoying it to a point. Let me explain that to you. Ron Livingston is awesome. Awesome as Loudermilk. I can kind of relate to him, let's put it that way, and his disdain for all mankind. And he gets in some really nice shots on people for their stupidity. But of course, that makes him fairly unattractive to most of humanity, even though his group, his sobriety group, gets him, and they seem to understand where he's coming from because they've all been through what he's been through. There is a big plot twist towards the end of season 1, even though this show's been out there for years. I will not spoil it for you. And here I am praising this show. Again, Livingston's great. His roommate, his sponsor, Will Sasso, is great. Will Sasso, of course, has been in a lot of things. Most notably, he played Curly in that Three Stooges movie that wasn't actually half bad years ago. And then they take in a third person who lives with them, a young woman who he's trying to nurture through her sobriety. There is one awful subplot, though, that almost completely ruins Loudermilk. It involves one of the members of the group and a guy who is conned into going to the sobriety group to a meeting because of his egotistical, conniving boss. And then he gets stuck with this other guy being his sponsor, and it's too much. It is way too much. It's over the top. I'm sorry to say this, but if this was happening to me in real life, I think after one day I would have got a machine gun and just put this guy into oblivion, because he's overbearing. He's ruining the guy's life. He thinks he's a drunk when he's really not, and he was just doing this to help his boss out. And it's one of those lazy writing vehicles where the poor hapless guy gets roped into a situation or a world where everything goes wrong and nobody will believe him, and there's nothing he can do except be abused physically, mentally, emotionally. The first thing I thought of, having to subject myself to this storyline in order to get through to the good stuff with Loudermilk, was After Hours, the classic movie involving a guy who gets stuck in a night in a world that he cannot control anything, and everything terrible and awful that can happen to him happens to him. And I'll probably have to dig that one out and watch it again. Griffin Dunne stars in that. Of course, Griffin Dunne, known for After Hours and An American Werewolf in London. Another great movie that I need to pull out and watch again, starring along with him, James Naughton. But I would recommend Loudermilk. At least first season is very good. Like I said, big plot twist at the end that makes things really interesting as we head into season 2. If you can get through this stupid subplot, then you will really enjoy Loudermilk a lot. Now, of course, I mentioned The Boys. As I'm recording here, recording a little bit later than normal, even though this is still going to drop on July the 13th. Still getting used to the new recording platform, Riverside. But The Boys has moved on now through 6 episodes. The 7th has dropped already as I'm recording this, but haven't had a chance to watch it yet. So we'll have episode 7 for you, our review of that, me and your Uncle Dave, next week on the weekend edition. Episode 6 is your typical crazy, weird, sexualized, perverted storyline that you would expect from The Boys. This one revolving around Tech Night. And let's just put it this way. There's a lot of leather, a lot of bondage, a lot of that weird, kinky stuff. You guys know this is an explicit podcast, so the kids should not be listening. But Huey gets sucked into this perverted world that Tech Night's got in his basement, in his mansion. Let's just say it's very, very disturbing on multiple levels. But what else would you expect from The Boys? Not quite as good as last episode. Episode 5 was probably the high point so far in season 4. But still, of course, it's The Boys. It's awesome. And then we'll give you a full season 4 wrap-up here in a couple weeks. Hate to say it's almost over already. But like I said, episode 7 is out there right now, dropped roughly around the time I'm taping this. And then next week, episode 8, the season finale, will be out as well. And then the week after that, we'll have our full season recap. Now, I mentioned over the past month or so that I've been watching Outer Range on Amazon Prime. Josh Brolin, Lily Taylor, Will Patton, the great, undervalued, underrated Will Patton. Well, bad news. Now, I'm halfway through season 2. I'm kind of in a holding pattern, but I've only got about 3.5 episodes left to go. So I'll finish it off. But the bad news is Amazon has decided over this past week to cancel Outer Range. So there will not be a season 3. So as I'm sitting here waiting to watch these last few episodes, I'm wondering if I'm going to get stuck with an unresolved cliffhanger a la Terriers, which Dave and I always joke about, left or right. And if you've never seen Terriers, one of the first great shows on FX. I think you can still watch it on Hulu. I would check that out. only one season, and they give you a terrible, awful cliffhanger that never gets resolved. So again, hoping Outer Range doesn't have a situation like that as well. Now, in other streaming news, saw a notification from the cast and crew of Stranger Things. Yes, we're all waiting for the final season. Well, they said they're halfway done. And normally you'd say, oh, cool. Don't know how real noteworthy that is. But the weird thing is, this is 24 weeks in shooting this final season of Stranger Things. 24 weeks in. And they're only halfway done. Can you imagine the commitment? If 24 weeks is the halfway point, that means, do the math, kids, 48 weeks. You're talking close to a full year's commitment for this show, one season of this show. Now, is it worth it? Of course it is. It's awesome. And I've been hearing mixed things about, are we going to get very, very long movie-length episodes like we did for the most part in the last season, season 4? Or are we going to get shorter episodes, which I believe one of the cast members talked about in a recent interview? It sounds to me like if they're filming for almost an entire year, I would believe that the episodes are going to be very, very long like they were in season 4. Now, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the bizarre happenings and goings-on with Max and HBO. Now, first up, bad news, which doesn't shock me coming from Warner Brothers Discovery. They're nothing but bad news, in my opinion. They're just like Paramount Plus. Of course, we'll have news about Paramount here in a few minutes. But we all know Max has been in cost-cutting mode, Warner Brothers Discovery. It looks to me like they, and Dave and I talked about this, they are going to be one of the casualties of the streaming wars. Because they're not trying. They're really not trying all that hard. They're relying on Harry Potter and Dune to carry them through, and all the other content is garbage, except for when they get an occasional theatrical release that they can pull in after a few months to Max. So the bad news, those of us who want to see the DC universe back and thriving, we know about James Gunn and Superman coming next year. Well, there was an Arkham Asylum series. Of course, Arkham Asylum from the Batman universe, which is where the crazies that Batman fought, the Joker, the Riddler, and the like, would be put when they were captured by the Caped Crusader, and then inevitably they would escape, and the cycle would begin again. Sounded like an unbelievable, awesome premise. Well, guess what? It ain't happening. Max has pulled the plug as of right now on any work on this Arkham Asylum series, which sucks balls. Then on top of this, I still don't understand this. We addressed this a couple weeks ago when, to confuse everybody, another reason why I think Max will end up failing in some way, shape, or form. Well, we're going to start rebranding all these original series. We mentioned Harry Potter coming up, Dune coming up, the It prequel, Welcome to Derry, have been rebranded as HBO originals instead of Max originals, so they can premiere, I guess, at the same time on HBO, the linear channel, as they do on Max, which, okay, who was stopping you from doing that anyway? So they're making a big deal about changing these from Max originals to HBO originals. And then now they've announced that they were on the fence about this Dune series that's coming up, and of course, The Penguin, which we've really been looking forward to here on Sports Frenzy. Those have now also been rebranded as HBO originals. So what's that going to do? How's that going to affect anybody or anything? Maybe, I guess, helps out people who still have subscriptions just to HBO, and I didn't even realize that was a thing anymore. Supposedly, I guess they're going to still debut, as they call it, linear debut on Max. This is all confusing and stupid, and I would expect nothing less from the idiots at Warner Brothers Discovery. Some other streaming news for you. The Old Man. Very solid first season. Series starring Jeff Bridges on FX, which means, of course, it'll be on Hulu as well. The Old Man Season 2 debuts September the 12th. Landman. The latest series from Taylor Sheridan. Of course, the genius behind Yellowstone, Tulsa King. Landman stars Billy Bob Thornton and Demi Moore. That will debut November 17th on Paramount Plus. And then, if you're into James Patterson, and I'm not, I think he's a hack. But if you're into James Patterson and you read the Alex Cross books, by my count, this will be the third attempt at putting together an Alex Cross project. Of course, we had 2 successful movies with Morgan Freeman, and then we had 1 unsuccessful reboot with Tyler Perry. So now we will get a TV series based on Alex Cross, starring Aldous Hodge. It is called Cross. It will debut on Amazon Prime on November the 14th. Then finally in TV and streaming, my recap of last weekend's WWE Money in the Bank. Drew McIntyre won the men's ladder match. Tiffany Stratton won the women's ladder match. Now, of course, Drew McIntyre, I'm not worried about spoiling this stuff. It's been a week. If you haven't heard what happened, you haven't watched Raw or SmackDown, that's on you. So Drew McIntyre immediately tried to cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase. By the way, interestingly, they were called Collector's Edition suitcases, briefcases that you could buy at the venue, stamped with Vought International on them, which of course is a reference to The Boys, which we just talked about, and The Boys was a sponsor of Money in the Bank. But Drew McIntyre tried to cash his case in, his contract in, later on that night, and his mortal enemy, CM Punk, got involved again and kept him from being able to become world champion again, and Damian Priest got to retain the title. So we have got a massive, massive blood feud. Not bloodline feud, but a blood feud brewing between Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, and possibly Seth Rollins, as he was not happy with CM Punk interfering, because like I said, it was originally a match between Damian Priest and Seth Rollins. Drew McIntyre cashes in his Money in the Bank contract, gets involved to make it a triple threat, no disqualification when it's a triple threat, messing up Seth Rollins' chance to become World Heavyweight Champion. Then I mentioned, of course, Tiffany Stratton won the women's Money in the Bank briefcase contract. I imagine she'll hold on to it a little while longer. We'll see how this all works out. Of course, Rhea Ripley made her return Monday night, which is great news for the women's division. Not so great news for Dominic Mysterio. or Liv Morgan. Of course, the big news, wah, 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 at Money in the Bank was that John Cena announced his retirement, but like Kiss, like a lot of these old rock bands, it will be an extended retirement tour ending next year at WrestleMania 41. Now, I do believe I heard on Monday night, Karrion Kross is already chirping about John Cena, so he might be the first one on this retirement tour to face John Cena. And then a little bit of a crossover from the world of real sports into the WWE. ESPN's Joe Tessitore, who has been featured on a lot of big-time events at ESPN, will actually join WWE. He will form a 3-person commentator booth with Corey Graves and Wade Barrett, which tells me that we're probably looking at Friday night SmackDown. Because Monday nights right now are Pat McAfee and that old goofball, I can't even remember his name right now, Michael Cole. So we'll see how Joe Tessitore fits in with Corey Graves and Wade Barrett. It doesn't shock me because neither Graves nor Barrett is really a quote-unquote play-by-play guy. They're more color commentary. Yes, and I know we're talking about wrestling. I get it. It's fake. All right, moving on to movies. Here on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple, iHeartRadio, Overcast, CastBox, Amazon Music, and Audible. Like how I slipped that in. That's usually your Uncle Dave's job. Those are all the places that you can find Sports Frenzy 2.0. Whether you listen to the weekend edition or our sports edition, which drops every Thursday morning. And then, of course, don't forget to check out the Facebook page, especially if you like sports. But even if you just listen to the weekend edition, you can find links going back years to all of our previous episodes. All right, when it comes to movies, let's do movie news first. Keep you in suspense. And then we will get to our big movie review of the week. Of course, that is the highly anticipated Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. Now, we are holding off. Last week we were kind of talking about reviewing 2 movies. But without Dave here, I'm going to hold off on The Beekeeper, which just recently hit Amazon Prime. Of course, Jason Statham. Surprising hit with The Beekeeper, considering that most of his movies domestically in North America usually pull in, outside of The Meg, his action movies usually pull in anywhere from 20 million to 40 million. And of course, The Beekeeper ended up clearing over 60 million. And of course, we're also not counting Fast and Furious, that type of stuff. We're talking about him and him alone in standalone action movies. So next week will be The Beekeeper. We've got new trailers out for you to check out. F1 coming next summer. Of course, Brad Pitt's racing flick. Be interested to see how that plays with audiences. The racing movies usually don't connect with a huge audience. So again, I'll be interested to see how F1 does next year. Gladiator 2. Did we really need a sequel to Gladiator? I guess we did. It looks okay. It looks mildly interesting. I need to see a little bit more of it before I will say yay or nay. Thumbs up or thumbs down, one way or the other. It is cool that it's got Denzel Washington in it, one of my favorite actors. And of course, the flavor of them in it in everything right now, Pedro Pascal. And then, God help us, it looks like another disaster coming from Marvel and Disney. First preview has dropped for their next series on Disney Plus. Kind of a follow-up, a sequel to WandaVision, which was actually very good, but I was not a fan of Agatha Harkness. And they decide, oh, well, let's make an entire series revolving around her. Who cares? And this looks like another PC piece of garbage, just like the Marvels. Men aren't allowed. Straight men aren't allowed in this. I know it's a witch's coven, which would imply all women. That's fine, I get it. But still, seems like they made room in it for a non-heterosexual man. Let's put it that way. Not looking forward to this at all. Luckily, my Disney Plus subscription will probably run out shortly after Agatha All Along debuts. Now, these two could be streaming news, could be movie news, so I moved them over to the movie section. Abigail, the movie that was recently in theaters concerning Dracula's daughter. Abigail will debut on Peacock July the 19th. And already out on Paramount Plus. You got kids, this was probably a good one to sit down and watch with them. Already on Paramount Plus, it debuted on July the 9th. That would be If, with Ryan Reynolds. Now, it hasn't become official yet, but it finally looks like this long, tedious process where Skydance has finally gotten through to Paramount with a bid that was acceptable. So Skydance supposedly has an $8 billion bid, $8 billion with a B, to take over Paramount. And if anything changes, we of course will let you know. But it looks like Skydance will be taking over Paramount, which of course also includes the CBS networks. Some fun stuff revolving around toys and movies. If you've got $150 to blow, coming August the 6th, a massive 1,500-piece, awesome beyond belief Lego set is going to be released, depicting one of the key iconic scenes from Jaws, featuring the shark attacking the three men on the orca. I've seen pictures of it. It looks fantastic. And then finally, in news that will upset and piss off everybody like me and like your Uncle Dave, there are certain movies, and we've talked about this, certain movies that you don't mess with. The only time they've been able to pull this off was The Magnificent Seven, where I didn't like the news of them redoing that. Yes, I know they did a TV series as well. But once again, you have the great Denzel Washington. You put it together, being faithful to the original. Of course, Chris Pratt was in it as well. So it ended up being okay. It ended up being pretty good. But now we've got two Clint Eastwood movies, classics, that are being remade. And I'm not happy. First up, Tom Cruise, who never met a property that somebody else came up with an idea, a storyline, that he didn't like pilfering. Now, you can call me a hypocrite because I love Mission Impossible, all those movies. He did a phenomenal job with that. Of course, a lot of people did not like him doing Jack Reacher. He's done The Mummy. And now He is set to star along with Scarlett Johansson in a remake of the 70s Clint Eastwood classic, The Gauntlet. Oh boy. But that one's not even the most disturbing. Now this one has no stars attached yet. It is in early development, but one of the guys behind the awesome film 300, based on Frank Miller's graphic novel, is now looking, along with a couple of other investors, a couple of other producers, to put together a remake of A Fistful of Dollars. How fucking dare you? A Fistful of Dollars is untouchable. Leave it alone. That is a classic that stands on its own. And between the news about the Gauntlet and this news about A Fistful of Dollars, I really wish that Clint Eastwood, still in great shape in his 90s, would go kick some ass and tell them, could you guys at least wait until I'm dead before you start ruining my legacy? All right, so going from Clint Eastwood and people trying to destroy his legacy, now we move on to somebody revisiting a legacy character, and that would be Eddie Murphy in Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. Of course, this is unofficially Beverly Hills Cop 4. And it's been decades since we have seen Axel Foley. Now, the thing about Beverly Hills Cop Axel F, I'm going to kind of tie this into my review last week of part 2 of that 90s show, where it's just enjoyable comfort food. It's well done, makes you laugh, amuses you, makes you nostalgic. Beverly Hills Cop Axel F basically accomplishes the same thing. There's nothing spectacular about this. There's not a freshness to it, I will say that. Even though it's been a long time, that in and of itself kind of gives it a certain originality. If you haven't gone back and watched the previous movies, this definitely will probably play a little better for you. There are some funny moments. Nothing as classic as the banana in the tailpipe, but still a couple funny moments. The one that sticks out to me is Eddie Murphy, and I'm not spoiling the plot for you, what plot there is. It's pretty standard, basic police procedural plot, but Eddie Murphy reconnects with his daughter in this, and she happens to be a lawyer, a defense attorney, so that causes all sorts of friction. And then she has changed her name. She does not have the last name of Foley, and so Eddie Murphy proceeds to make fun of her new last name, and it's classic, typical mocking Eddie Murphy. And then he gets a couple funny lines in the opening sequence in Detroit. Of course, again, he goes from Detroit to Beverly Hills. He is joined, of course, by his old friends Rosewood and Taggart. And Judge Reinhold, unfortunately, looking a little bit worse for wear. But it's all in good fun. I loved it. I thought it was just what we need right now. A lot of people, and I have to agree with this, and this might be a little bit of a foreshadowing moment for the future of cinema, in that this one really, more so than almost any other streaming exclusive release, you would think would have been a huge, huge hit if they'd released it in theaters. And I don't know how Netflix justifies, just like any other streaming service, how they justify X number of viewers means it was worth the hundreds of millions of dollars outlay that we put into the budget for production. I don't know how they figure that out. I'm not a Hollywood bean counter. But it just seems like Beverly Hills Cop Axel F could have really benefited from a wide theatrical release. Now, Netflix will drop these movies in select cinemas, but outside of Knives Out, The Glass Onion, none of them have really had a major impact. And Knives Out, The Glass Onion had a very limited release before it debuted on Netflix, and I still believe it made somewhere in the neighborhood of $15 million. And again, very few theaters involved, very limited time release timeline, was maybe a week and a half, and it still pulled in $15 million. You wonder if Netflix shouldn't push more into theatrical and then just bring this stuff immediately into their streaming service, kind of like what you see with Max and Paramount Plus. But again, I don't know how the accounting works here. I don't know how the math works. Maybe Netflix has got it all figured out and they can justify the huge budget for a movie like this without having any income coming in from theatrical. But I'll give Axel F a solid 3 Frenzies. Again, I think it's nice. It's comfort food. It's something we need right now. Nothing spectacular. Nothing that's going to be in the running for movie of the year. But just fun. Great way to spend a couple hours. You'll feel good. You'll laugh. I wouldn't say it's as good as the first one. Probably not as good as the second. Debatable. Probably a little bit better than the third. But I'm not committing to that. Alright, so that's it for the movie news of the week. So now we'll move on to, unfortunately, sad news, moments of silence, people in pop culture who left us over the past week or two. We'll start off with music. Joe Bonsall, singer for the Oak Ridge Boys, who joined them in the early 70s and just recently retired from the Oak Ridge Boys, and unfortunately, he has passed away. This is kind of a life lesson. Now, he was singing, he was enjoying what he was doing, performing in front of audiences. We're not talking about the drudgery of an office job, but look at it as a life lesson. As I mentioned, he just retired from the Oak Ridge Boys, I believe, this past January. So roughly 6 months ago, 7 months ago, and then he passes away. Never really had a chance to enjoy retirement, so think about that. Get out early while you can so you can enjoy your life. Don't be a person who ends up dying 6 months after you put in your papers. Also in music. Now we know the great Steelers Wheel song, Stuck in the Middle with You. I'm one of the prominent members of Steelers Wheel. Of course, everybody thinks of Jerry Rafferty. But Joe Egan passed away here recently. John Landau, not the John Landau connected with Bruce Springsteen, but the John Landau who helped produce a lot of James Cameron's big hit movies like Titanic and Avatar, passed away. And then one of the great Hollywood screenwriters responsible for movies like Chinatown, The Last Detail, and Shampoo. That would be Robert Towne. Unfortunately passed away here recently. So Thoughts and prayers go out to all the family and friends of those four gentlemen. And you know what that means? That means it is time to pivot as we move from sorrow and tragedy to abject stupidity. It is time for the Red Foreman Dumbasses of the Week. Of course, we just talked about that 90s show, The Great Red Foreman, waiting patiently to stick his foot up somebody's ass because they are stupid beyond belief. Now, your Uncle Dave's not here. Normally, we would run all these by him. He and I would pick our choice for the one dumbass of the week among our contestants. So I'm just going to throw these 6 out there. You guys, I believe now you can directly comment on each and every episode. So you want to put your 2 cents in, you want to pick the dumbass of the week, feel free. Let's start off with just an awful, awful scene in North Carolina. Of course, we just had the 4th of July here recently. Patriotic time for America. Well, scumbag thieves decided to steal a 30-foot by 50-foot American flag that was hanging from the trestle of a railroad at a theme park in North Carolina called the Tweetsie Railroad. And it's just dumbasses. What a despicable act to steal a massive American flag like that. What are you going to do with it? What is the point? Now, nobody's claimed responsibility. I haven't heard any follow-ups on this. I don't know if it was dumbass climate protesters. I don't know what the situation was. But just in and of itself, these American flag thieves are dumbasses. Then, of course, we've got the idiot Gavin Newsom, of course, governor of California. A lot of people think he should take over as the Democrat candidate for the presidency after Joe Biden's questionable performance at the debate a few weeks ago with Donald Trump. But this guy, he might look the part, slick back hair, tanned, great shape, handsome dude. But trust me, he's a dumbass, and this is the latest example. He has decided, instead of focusing on working on the economy of California, which is a mess, other issues, because California is definitely a mess overall, he's decided, let's spend some time doing a podcast with Marshawn Lynch. Yes, that Marshawn Lynch, the doofus former running back for the Seattle Seahawks, who I think might have an IQ of minus 22. And guess what? The podcast is called Politickin'. Politickin'. Yeah, that sounds like something a responsible, mature governor should be doing. A podcast with Marshawn Lynch. Gavin Newsom, you are truly a dumbass. Ben & Jerry's, one of the most disgusting companies in America, always trying to insert politics into the simple, wonderful art of creating ice cream. Wonderful different flavors, but of course it comes at a cost for the consumer because you are funding their radical political agenda. Going back again to the 4th of July, Ben & Jerry's couldn't help themselves, had to post on Independence Day a message about racism and how America is still fighting its racist past. Wow. Let's shoot off some fireworks and eat some dogs and brats and burgers over that sunny, happy July 4th post. And that wasn't the only one. Going back to the month of June, they posted 10 separate messages on social media, all dealing with woke issues. So remember, stay the hell away from Ben & Jerry's ice cream. You're supporting radical hippie dip fucks. Don't give them a single cent of your hard-earned money. Ben & Jerry's, you are dumbasses. Now, I like Jackass. Maybe not the biggest fan, but I do enjoy it. And it does go a little too far sometimes. Kind of like we talked about The Boys back in our TV segment. It goes a little too far sometimes. Well, one of the members of the Jackass troupe might be going way, way, way too far. Steve-O. Steve-O has said that he is going to get breast implants, D-cup breast implants, only for a, quote, max 2 months, unquote. He swears the doctor has told him there is no danger to him. But again, I wonder where the hashtag #MeToo movement is during this. The stories we've heard about women who've suffered back pain or complications from breast implants, this just seems like it's mocking, it's tone deaf, and it's mocking these women who've suffered through bad situations involving breast implants. I don't think this is funny, Steve-O. It's kind of pathetic and sad that your career has come down to the point where you have to take this kind of extreme, stupid, insulting measure to try to get a few laughs and a few bucks. So sorry, Steve-O, you are not only a jackass, but a dumbass. Kevin Bacon. Now this is an interesting story because I've heard two different sides to this. Now Kevin Bacon, a story recently came out where he claimed he disguised himself as quote-unquote normal with prosthetics, makeup artist, of course, helping him out here. Went out, get a cup of coffee, mill around like, again, a quote-unquote normal person. That in and of itself is degrading. But then he says, yeah, it really is degrading. The quote is, "This sucks. I want to go back to being famous," unquote. Now, the other side of this is there are certain people out there who are saying, and I'm sure it can be looked up and verified, that this is a quote-unquote joke that he's been playing around with for years and years. I believe going back to 2017 is what I read. And he likes to pull this out of the hat every once in a while because he thinks it's funny. Well, number one, it's not funny. I don't laugh about this. I think it's pathetic. And I think it's just another example of how you show the disconnect between the Hollywood elites and normal, common, everyday people who make fun of flyover country, because you don't live in California, D.C., or New York. You're not worth our time. And I like Kevin Bacon. I really didn't think he would do something like this. And again, if it's a joke, it's just not a funny joke. It's a very insulting, very stupid joke. And if he did actually do this, then it's still pathetic, and it still makes him a dumbass. Then finally, I believe in free speech. I do. And I am not a religious person. I consider myself agnostic. I believe in something. I just don't know what it is. I don't subscribe to any person's viewpoint. I don't need a book to tell me what to believe in. I don't need to go to a mass on Sunday or whenever to tell me how to believe, what to believe. And I'm not anti-religion either. There's a great sense of community that can come from attending church. And religion gives a lot of people hope and faith. I'm not denigrating religion. I'm just saying it's not for me. Kind of off the track here, but I believe in free speech. I believe in freedom of religion, but there are limits. Now, this applies more to freedom of speech. We're going down to Tennessee. A federal court ruled that a woman who had a sign in her front yard, it was technically a political sign, was to be awarded damages by the city that she lived in because they fined her after they told her to take the sign down. And you're sitting there thinking, what could the sign have said that would force this kind of reaction from the city? Well, it had profanity on it. She's not happy with Biden. She's not happy with Trump. Who can blame her? Who can blame her? So in and of itself, I don't have a problem with the sign she put out. But the problem is she put it out in her yard in plain view for everybody to see. Children, people who might be sensitive to profanity. And yes, there are people out there who are sensitive to it, even though I'll fucking curse every day of the week and 6 times on Sunday. But the sign said, fuck 'em both, 2024. And the sign in of itself had a stupid typo in that it had an apostrophe after EM. It should have been before EM because the apostrophe is supposed to take the place of the missing letters. In this case, would have been the TH in them. But I'm sidetracked again. I'm sorry. Again, the sentiment, if you want to say this to people in private, if you want to take your chances and post it on social media and see if Facebook or Twitter will allow it, then do it. That's fine. But putting this sign, fuck 'em both 2024, out in your front yard in plain view is wrong. There are limits to free speech when it comes to obscenity. I would not want to be driving by this house with a young child. If I go back 15 years to when my daughter was 8 years old, would I want her seeing this sign as we drove by this person's house? And her turning to me and going, Dad, what does fuck 'em both mean? No. Take the damn sign down and stop being a dumbass. And the fact that a federal court claimed that this sign was not obscene, the homeowner and the federal court involved are all dumbasses. So there you go, kids. You make the choice this week. It's up to you. You want to drop a comment and let me know which of those 6 contestants are the true dumbass of the week, go for it. I personally hate each and every one of them. I can't tell you who I would go with. I really can't. There's so many great candidates this week, or terrible candidates, depending on your point of view. I lean towards Gavin Newsom and Ben and Jerry's, because they're both West Coast hippy-dippy fucktards, but that's just me. But like I said, that is it for the weekend edition. Sports Frenzy 2.0 over and done here on July the 13th. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope everything comes through okay on our new recording platform, Riverside. Keep in mind that next Thursday morning you will get a chance to listen to your Uncle Dave and I back together again, reunited. And it will feel so good as we get back into the sports stuff. And then next Saturday morning, 7 days from now, July the 20th, we'll be back with the weekend edition, a review of Party Gras 2.0, Brett Michaels, Lou Graham, Don Felder, Dee Snider, live in concert. Also, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have a review of Jason Statham in The Beekeeper. So thanks to everyone for tuning in, listening to me solo this week. Once again, I hope everything comes through okay. So far, there are a couple bumps, a couple hiccups, but I'm getting through them. Glad, actually, that Dave is not here this week, so I can work through all this stuff, and we can run this a little bit smoother next week. But until next week, take care, kids. Be safe. Love you all. See ya.